This question is a little bit more about, you talk about how we need senior buy-in. You talk about that you have the statistics about how many more procurements you can get. And, the problem that we see is you also get the people, that are like, okay, well, that's fine, but the law, if you read the law as is, it might be cheaper just to buy a reader for every blind person we have and stuff like that. And then you have those type of people, well, yeah, it's the right thing to do. Okay, great, but we don't have statistics of what parts of the population we are missing out on, what types of innovations we're missing out on, or what the cost is. If we are compliant now, how much is it going to cost us to be with this revised standards? What is the cost? Because that's really what the CIOs care about. Like, unless you get a CIO that has a personal connection, they're really looking at the bottom line. What's the time that's going to take me? What's the cost? And when we say, oh, maybe like this or maybe that, it's cheaper to do it at the beginning, it's more expensive to do it at the end. Great, but what are the actual figures? And does anyone actually have any of that with the government of who we're missing out on and how much is it going to cost us to make things compliant?
Great question.
I definitely want to take that. I mean, this one resonates with me. This is a great cap to the great discussion because it really speaks to what I've been focused on and frustrated with and kind of where I would like to take the program. So the cost is just one way of saying we need to think about the problem and the solutions from the decision maker's perspective. So you say the CIO could be any executive, but you're talking about leadership here, and they're making calls in their head, and they're not saying, oh, we got to comply with every law. Every leader out there has to do a cost-benefit analysis about which laws they really want to conform and comply with and which ones maybe they can let slide. And for too long, accessibility has been on the let slide list. And I think there's a lot we can do to move it up that scale. I don't know if it's ever going to be up there competing with cybersecurity, but a couple of well-placed lawsuits may change the math. Please don't imply that as saying I'm trying to sue you, but that needs to be conveyed as part of the cost. If you're appealing to, so we talked about appealing to the kind of sentiments and the empathy of decision makers, which I think is hugely important, but then let's appeal to the base kind of survival instincts and kind of management thinking of the folks who need to implement this and say, yeah, you can let it slide, but we think you've got a 10% chance that you're going to face $1 million lawsuit, whereas the preventive measures will cost you, $100,000 right now. So we really have to make this not just an emotional argument, but a dollars and cents. So how's this going to hit them in the pocketbook? So I absolutely agree. And that's something that, I've asked the team to really focus on. Like, let's look at all the suits that are out there. Where are they being targeted? Like, what are the real threats, the downsides? And I don't want to focus on that, but that's a reality within the environment that we have to talk about.
I want to say something real quick in answer to that and just set up Bruce. And he knows what I'm setting him up for. So every regulation in the United States federal government has to have a financial impact analysis done. You just heard that about we have a new law on taxes and what's it going to cost, right? And so it had, before it went, it had to go and have an impact analysis on what it's going to cost, okay? And so this standard had that same thing. Da-da-da-da, Bruce?
So thank you, Kate. Yes, I was going to jump in there. It's kind of a boring answer, but yes, we have the final regulatory impact analysis, and we did do decent work on trying to figure out what it was going to cost individual agencies. So you should be able to, if you need a number to give to a CIO, you should be able to go into that and dig into it. It's only summarized in the final rule. You have to go out to either regulations.gov or to our website to look at the final regulatory impact analysis to get the detailed breakdown. But yes, there are some actual numbers in that.
But there's no numbers of risk.
No, there are no numbers of risk. So that's the cost of coming into compliance, assuming that you're already conforming to the original standards. The cost of ending up on the front page of the Washington Post, I don't have a number for you on that one.
Well,
CMS and Social
Well,
Security.
Oh,
but
well, that's true. It might be cheaper to pay out. It might be cheaper to hire a reader, but I really don't think hiring a full-time reader, because you're not going to start discriminating. I'm very skeptical that if you run the numbers, that's actually cost effective, let alone feels very good, right, kind of thing.
But I feel like this comes back to this idea of accessibility is still the add-on. It's still
Yeah,
but there's
exactly.
this thing out here called accessibility, and maybe we're at risk, and maybe it costs more.
Yep.
Accessibility needs to be part of the modernization of IT. How is what I'm procuring the most secure technology? How is it the most accessible technology? How is it including mobile technology? So instead of saying accessibility is something on the side, it's wrapping that conversation in and helping CIOs understand that it is right there front and center, and the right vendor is going to understand how to explain those pieces together, not separate.
I so agree with that. And building it in, by the way, we've talked about a defect being really expensive to actually deal with once it's got in production, right? Now, the whole concept of DevOps is that you're integrating operations and development. So development starts to feel the pain that operations was talking about. Hey, this person called me complaining about such and such. Well, development starts to gain that intelligence. And so if you build it in, it's 100 times cheaper. It becomes a very different argument when you're paying 100 times as much because you've been neglecting it throughout the life cycle, right? And there are many studies that have been done. So this is not DQ specific.
But if you look at it also, if you look at what John and Dominic, the kinds of things that they're doing, it's to take it operationally within the federal government as much as possible, so that accessibility is more of a default way that we operate, as opposed to an exception.
Yep.
And that's, taking a page from behavioral economics, because whatever the default is what people will do without arguing about it, because that's just how things get done.
And Debbie, I know this is going to resonate with you, but there are incidental factors like, you're talking about the friends and family factor, okay? You're talking about the millennials. I know my kid, my son, who's a millennial, votes with his pocketbook, and he is very socially conscious, responsible. He is not going to buy from a company that is, really discriminating against anybody, right? So there's that factor. There's the aging population. If you add all that, I don't know if you saw how paranoid I was when Katie was up here, when my assistive technology was almost under her foot. I was running to grab those glasses because I need those, right? So we collectively have to think about, the modernization of IT and the different user groups out there.